This talk was originally presented at the monthly meeting of the Washington, D.C. Star Wars Collecting Club, DCSWCC, on April 13th, 2024. In the ensuing 2 weeks, it was enhanced and committed to video for a wider audience. This is the first in a series of presentations to help you prepare for Star Wars Celebration Japan, which will be held in April 2025. The goal is to make sure you have the tools you need to make the most of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. My name is Martin Thurn. Japan has been a great love of mine ever since my first stay there in 1985, and that feeling has been reinforced during 4 more trips, most recently in 2023. But my love for Star Wars is even greater and dates back to 1977 when I saw the movie for the first time and started collecting. While the information being offered is geared toward a first-time traveler to Japan, even if you've been there before, I think you'll get a lot out of it. Some people may have no interest in traveling abroad, and some people may have no interest going to Japan specifically. That's perfectly fine. But for the rest of you, if you're on the fence, please go. It'll be worth it. Whatever your conscious or subconscious goals are, it'll be worth it. Cultural enrichment, religious enlightenment, making memories, or just having fun in the moment, it'll be worth it. There's plenty of help available for planning, as you'll see throughout today's presentation. There's plenty of time for planning. You have a whole year. We can work toward making your trip perfect, but short of that, it can be darn near close to perfect. And at the very least, if you pay attention to my tips, it can definitely be a mistake-free trip. After the planning is done, you can get help from me and others if you need it for putting your plan into action. Visiting Japan can be intimidating, but don't be afraid. Fear leads to anger and suffering and stuff like that. Are you worried about the language barrier? That's not really a problem. Almost all the information you'll need as a tourist is presented in both Japanese and English. Japan is very friendly to tourists, and it should be even more so next year. Are you worried about being a bad tourist or making cultural faux pas? That's actually not a bad fear to have, but again, pay attention to my tips and you'll have nothing to worry about. You will not be alone on this trip. By my reckoning, 8 DC Club members have said they're going. At least 25 members of sister clubs and the ASWCC coalition are planning to attend. Almost 50 people have already joined my Facebook group, and those are just the people I know personally. Throw in 501st members if you're friendly with that crowd, lots of other collectors and fans. It's entirely possible that there could be an American Star Wars fan in your physical vicinity for most of your trip. When we all get to Japan, we can help each other there too, but don't expect hand-holding, because if you follow my advice, you won't need anyone to hold your hand, and we all have our own things that we want to do and see, and they're probably different from yours. But we won't abandon you. Help can be available if you need it. Martin's advice? Be like Anakin. Do it. Exactly 1 year from now, I and many of you and your friends will be in Japan in the weeks before and after Celebration for sightseeing and shopping. Preparation for this trip starts now. Are we crazy for planning so far in advance? Maybe. But it helps us to relax, like Yoda. I'm assuming here that if you're going all that way, you're going to take the opportunity to spend more time in Japan than just the 3 or 4 days for Celebration. What types of places do you want to visit? What's specific places do you want to visit? Places here can refer to anywhere from particular islands to general regions or certain prefectures, cities, town, neighborhood, or even specific buildings, depending on your knowledge of Japan and its history and your own interests. It can also refer to types of places like Buddhist temples and statues, Shinto shrines, historic castles, heck, chain restaurants, famous movie filming locations, you name it. It can also refer to things you want to buy, such as cheap souvenirs or expensive Star Wars collectibles or anything in between. It can also refer to activities you want to do, such as train spotting, experiencing a traditional Japanese public bath, hiking in nature, meeting unusual animals, watching sports like baseball or sumo, playing pachinko, partaking in adult services, seeing traditional plays and drama, etc. It can also refer to types of food you want to eat, such as ramen, pork cutlet, tempura, eel, wagyu steak, convenience store food, or even matcha green tea ice cream, which is everywhere in Japan. Whatever it is, whatever they are, write them all down. I use Google Docs because it's available on my computer and on my phone, and you can even set it up to be available offline too. So wherever you are, whenever you get an idea or inspiration, you can write it down. When you get a good list going, put them in priority order. At this point, don't worry about where they're located or how to get tickets or any of the logistics stuff. We're just making a list, checking it twice. Dream big. Go crazy. Martin's advice: go off the beaten path. For many of the places you put on your list, I bet there's going to be another similar place that's less crowded or easier to get to or cheaper to access, but of equal travel value. A hidden gem. For example, if you want to see shrines and temples, Kyoto is the canonical city, and there are like the top 5 shrines that every travel guide talks about and every tourist tries to go. But that makes them all extremely crowded, which for some people can mean the difference between misery and elation. You don't need to go through that because there are big, beautiful shrines and temples all over Japan in every big city and small town you could possibly imagine visiting during your time there. Yes, it can take more research to find the hidden gems, but depending on your travel style and expectations, it can definitely be worth it. I am not a financial expert and I don't claim to know a lot about budgeting, but I have some thoughts based on my experience. First, some really good news. The exchange rate is extremely favorable to the dollar. It has been for a couple years now, and there's no end in sight despite the Japanese government's attempts at intervention. On the right side of the screen here is a bar graph showing actual expenses from my most recent trip to Japan in the fall of 2023. I debated with myself about including this chart, but we need some starting point for reference, so here it is. Specifically, this represents a 3-week trip for 2 people, but you should be able to adapt it to your situation. From left to right, the purple bars show relative costs for airfare, lodging, food. The umbrella represents travel insurance, including medical coverage. Then there's local transportation, gifts, and finally, attraction tickets, admission fees, and the like. Note that this chart does not include two expenses that can vary widely for each person, namely Star Wars collectibles and bullet train tickets. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Adapting this for one person, basically everything except the lodging will get cut in half, I guess. Adapting this for 3 or more people gets tricky because it's hard to find hotel rooms in Japan that can comfortably accommodate 3 people. So for now, I'm claiming that it's safe to estimate lodging at the rate of 2 people per room, and then each room is about the same cost as one airplane ticket. We don't want to get bogged down in too much detail because we're a whole year in advance here, but I know you need some dollar amounts to make a budget. Airfare can vary widely based on many factors such as the seasons, fuel costs, etc. But for today's purposes, based on what I'm seeing in the market, you should probably budget $2,000 for a round-trip ticket. If you're really pinching pennies and willing to put in the extra effort, you might be able to fly for $1,500, but again, this far in advance, hey, why not dream a little bit bigger for planning purposes? But of course, feel free to gather some data on your own. Do some searches, pull up travel booking websites, pretend like you're making a reservation, and see what you get. But I do recommend that you use incognito mode in your browser. And then when you're setting up reservations for hotels and airfare for that matter, try to use the same days of the week as you're likely to be actually traveling. It can make a difference. But until you do all that, for now, we can put in some big round numbers. If you're not flying first class, and if you're not staying in a 5-star suite hotel, and if you're not eating A5 Wagyu beef every night, and if you're not zipping back and forth long distance across the country for 2 weeks, and if you're not bringing home a suitcase full of vintage Japanese exclusive collectibles, I claim that one person should be able to enjoy 2 weeks in Japan for $5,000. Armed with that information, however you modify your lifestyle, financial activities to make it possible is up to you. Martin's advice: don't forget to budget for the value of your time. You can spend a lot of time searching for flights and watching the fares fluctuate, and you might save $100 by choosing a flight with a 6-hour layover in Toronto. But is that really a good trade-off of your valuable time? As I mentioned, there are a lot of resources available to guide your quest for travel destinations. YouTube is great for getting info, both general and detailed. Personally, YouTube is my best source of inspiration, even after all the times I've been to Japan and all the places and sites I've seen there. At this stage, you should focus on the big picture and gathering information you need to decide where you want to go. Don't get too in-depth about any one location. Heck, if you watch too much, you might ruin the fun of going there and seeing it for yourself. As a good example, there are videos like 100 Things to Do in Tokyo. Quick snippets that should give you lots of ideas. If you still feel lost or overwhelmed, check out sample itineraries of guided tours and package deals that are out there. Speaking of which, guided tours are not necessarily a bad thing. They can be extremely convenient and give you a great taste of what's there. As with almost every aspect of life, you can use Google search. Once you have an idea of what search terms to put in, Google Maps will become more important in later phases of planning, but who knows? You might see something interesting just scrolling around. As with almost every aspect of life, you can find some good info on Reddit. There's a Reddit called Japan Travel. But Reddit is Reddit. Real people trying to be overly helpful, and the opposite. You can find good descriptions and great details based on real experiences, but you can also find just as many horror stories. I'm sure there are Facebook groups for Japan travel, but I don't use Facebook for that, and honestly I have no idea whether the signal to noise ratio is reasonable. If it's like the rest of Facebook, probably not. But let me know if you have success on Facebook. There are websites, there are tons of websites out there. If you have a favorite site for other travel destinations or information, chances are they have a Japan section. Specifically for Star Wars related destinations in Japan, I wrote a detailed webpage, Star Wars Collecting Tour of Japan, which is based on verified first-hand information. There's a link to it in the description below. Martin's advice: ask your friends for suggestions. What specific things should you be doing now, 1 full year in advance? This is your homework to get started on today. And number 1 on the list, if you don't have a passport, apply now. If your passport expires before October 2025, renew now. Japanese immigration wants to see plenty of valid time remaining on your passport, even after you're scheduled to leave. The next 3 items on this list will be tightly interrelated as your planning progresses, but for now, we're not going to sweat the details. Item 2, you're going to be working on your list of places to go and things to see. Let the list be long at this point. Put the kitchen sink on there. But do your best to prioritize which ones are most important to you. If you're not traveling alone, make sure to consult your family or your companions to get their input too. Item 3, start thinking about how many days you'll spend in Japan. Just like any other vacation, this is controlled by how much time you can take off work, how long your family and pets can survive without you, how long you can stand to be away from the comforts of home, all that stuff. Same for any vacation, but this is probably on a larger scale. Item 4, your budget is going to be affected by how many hotel nights you need and whether you want to venture far from Tokyo, etc. So your actual budget amount is going to evolve as you finish out your prioritized list. But since you don't have those details decided yet, you can just use our round figure of $5,000 as a starting point. If you need to, create a savings plan to get you there. Again, this budgeting is not my forte, but you should start now to minimize the effort, just like compounding interest. Okay, item 5, last but not least, join my Facebook group, Star Wars Celebration Japan, Useful Info. As the name says in all capital letters, this group is strictly no fluff. Joining and reading everything will not be a waste of your time. There's a link to this group in the description below. Martin's advice? Have I said this already? Don't sweat the details. Not yet, anyway. You'll have plenty of time for that later, and we'll have more presentations to guide you through the whole process. You have your homework. We will regroup in 3 months to check your progress and give you some new assignments. Do you have any questions? Feel free to ask in the comments below or in the Facebook group. Thanks for watching.